This is KPPQ-Lp Ventura, 104.1 FM, and we're in the Women's Room, where we appreciate and support each other. I'm your host, Kathleen Good. My guest today is Virginia Matsuda, who is a hypnotherapist and a healing arts practitioner. I asked her here today to talk about this healing art and how it might be used for healing yourself without drugs or for changing certain limiting behaviors. We're so happy to have you here today, Virginia.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, well, thank you. Virginia, let's start by describing for our listener some of your extensive background, like 30 years in the medical and healing arts.
Kathy, I've been in medical offices as an administrator for over 20 years.
Oh, my goodness.
And I've been in legal offices and corporate banking, but the medical part was way over 20 years. And I've been a Reiki master and teacher for over 30 years.
Now, Reiki is something that is like an energy kind of treatment, right?
Correct. It's used for people with cancer quite extensively, and it's used in several of the hospitals around here.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So if you're a Reiki practitioner, you can volunteer at St. John's or community here in Ventura.
So it's kind of a laying your hands on people?
It is. It's energy brought from the universe to that person. And that's to help increase their own personal energy so that they can heal themselves.
Oh, okay. And then you studied hypnotherapy, which also is used for healing. Where did you study?
I studied in Nipomo. It's a school that was at the time approved by American hypnotist examiners, and they no longer are... they're no longer in business. They're not a school anymore for this. So if I were to go back and retrain on other things, I would be going to an ACHE approved school. So
what attracted you to these healing arts?
I've always been interested in healing, even when I was a little girl. I'd go to the library and I'd check out books, only they'd be adult books on doctors and nurses.
Oh, my goodness. So did you, heal anybody? Like, if your mom got sick, you looked up some stuff?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay. But you're just interested.
Interested, yeah.
Yeah, interested. Well, let's see. I had surgery last year, and I discovered that my surgeon was very supportive of having hypnotherapy beforehand. So do the healing arts work well with medical science, like a sort of complementary medicine?
They do. Hypnosis is really a great complementary technique for people to relax, go through the process of the surgery, but as well as recovery. And most of the people I've worked with have healed, I'd say, in a third to a half the time.
Oh, wow. That's
so when you talk to your body, you tell your body what you want it to do. And your subconscious, if it agrees, will go ahead and help you heal more quickly.
Okay. So hypnotherapy can be used to alter other behaviors besides the healing we've been talking about. What are some other uses of hypnosis?
A lot of people use hypnosis to stop smoking, weight loss, but I use mostly for PTSD, grief, depression, pain control, fears and phobias, agoraphobic behaviors.
And I'm interested that it works with depression.
It does.
What kind of suggestion might you give someone who's suffering from depression?
We need to talk to the subconscious and find out why the depression. There's a theory by some people that depression is anger turned inwards. And I've seen some of that. Yeah. And so when we can find the anger, it helps. We don't have to, and I can do it without getting to that point, but we really have to be able to get the subconscious to agree to make these changes.
So you've already started on my next question. How does hypnosis work?
Well, you put someone into I do anyway, a light state of hypnosis. I don't really want them in the somnambulistic state because they can't respond. And I want them to be able to respond in some way to what I'm doing or asking. A lot of people have been in hypnosis and never known that they were. If they've watched TV and someone comes up and talks to them and they don't hear them, they're in a focused hypnotic state. They just don't think of it that way.
Oh, that's like my husband watching sport.
Correct. And he doesn't hear a word you say.
No. That's really interesting. I'm going to tell him I understand.
Well, you always wonder, is it because they want to hear you or don't want to hear you?
This is true. Okay. So anything more on how hypnosis works that would help our listener understand?
We're really working a lot with the subconscious mind. Some the conscious, but more the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is like our child, so it's very literal. And so we're working on that basis with that. But you still have to have the person be willing on a subconscious level to address these. Now, consciously, you say, yes, I am. But subconsciously, that may not be the case. So we then have to work on accessing it in a way that the subconscious agrees to make these changes.
So you're really working with different levels of the person.
Correct.
And that leads me to another question. Can anyone make you do something against your will with hypnosis?
Well, it's always been my understanding that you cannot. That's someplace in your subconscious mind you've given permission to act like the chicken or something else.
Right.
Where people who are stand-up comics in general or like attention, they are really easy to make them do something because they like to play the clown or get up in front of people. It's not as usual for people that are not comfortable getting up, but there are a few people that it will still work on.
What do you mean? That they will do something they'd rather not?
Consciously, they'd rather not, but subconsciously, they gave permission because they felt that was okay.
Oh, okay. So do more women than men seek help with issues or habits they struggle with and are not able to change alone?
I'd say yes, in general.
More women see doctors.
Correct.
Yeah.
The men just tend to say, no, I'm not going to take a look at that.
Yeah,
Either the doctor's office or
I'm watching
someplace else.
Yeah. So do you work with people of both genders and all ages?
I do. I think the youngest I've worked with is my grandson at 8. He was afraid to go to the dentist, and so we cleared that right before he went to the dentist, and he was perfectly fine.
Wow.
But I work with people even in their 80s, so all ages, a lot lately with teenagers that have anxiety.
What would you say to somebody who's afraid of hypnosis, like fears that what you brought up, that you might make them act like a chicken?
Well, I'm never going to say anything that will go against their moral code or their moral ethic. I'm never going to ask them to do anything that would be harmful to them. And you always, even in that light state of hypnosis, you always have a choice of saying, no, I'm not going to do that, whatever they're asked for. And I have had a couple of people where you go along on your regular way of working with the person that have come right up out of hypnosis because I said something that triggered them. They didn't want to look at it or do that.
Oh, so they kind of woke up or just were alert
and
again.
They went back in, but we just had to come at it a different way.
Oh, okay. Well, explain to your listener how hypnotherapy works. In other words, how can a person use the mind to heal the body. And I guess you'll have to acquaint us at the same time with the mind-body relationship.
Well, the subconscious, again, is the driving force. So if you have a lot of negative self-talk, your body and your mind is able to say, okay, that's what you're telling me. That's what I want. So I will produce that for you. So for years and years, even before I got into hypnosis, I would say, I don't get sick. And I have gone nearly 20 years working with not getting sick.
Wow.
I just don't. It's because I keep telling my subconscious I don't get sick. Subconscious says, I can do that for you. But if I told it something negative, it would produce that as well. So you have to work on what you think.
Right.
Yeah.
So how, talking about the split between mind and body, I mean, I can hear people that I know saying, well, just saying that isn't going to cause, my toe to hurt or something. But, how would you answer them or comment on that?
It is it's a fine line for some people because they don't believe it's possible. But until they actually try it, how are they going to know?
Okay.
So most of my clients that have major negative self-talk, I ask them to try to catch that negative self-talk, and at that moment, reverse it to a positive instead of a negative statement. And if they do it long enough, they'll find that this starts to turn around.
Well, I actually brainstormed a few negative sort of mind chatter, mind scripts that I've heard. Things like, I'm just no good at doing anything creative. I'm no good at meeting people. No one likes me. I get a cold every winter. I'm going to be in a lot of pain after surgery. So are these the kinds of things you're
Correct.
talking about?
Yes, and if you turn that back around to the positive side, I have many creative qualities. So you don't try to make your subconscious believe something that it can't.
Right.
But you say it in a way that's giving it an opening to go that direction.
So what would you say if someone said, I get a cold every winter, I get 2 colds every winter?
I would probably do like I do. I don't get sick. And eventually, it isn't immediate, but eventually the subconscious just starts believing that for you and producing that effect.
That effect. Very interesting. So do you think everyone has the capacity to use hypnosis?
Almost everyone. There are a few people that it's more difficult. And then you have to find ways around that. Maybe their ADD in their mind doesn't shut down well, as in it constantly goes and they're so tense you have to find ways around it with other techniques before the hypnosis.
I mean, would you use your Reiki technique or talk?
I would probably be using the emotional freedom technique.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll get to that in just a moment. I have another question here. Are you doing the hypnosis for the person, or is it the person who is accepting the suggestions, doing the hypnosis, or is it sort of both of you?
It's a both of you. It's a case of their being willing to go the pathway that I'm guiding them. And when a client comes in, I have them sign a paper that they're the co-therapist. Because there has to be some kind of agreement within them that they are going to be helping themselves. I don't want to be the one they depend on. I want them to be empowered.
Oh, okay. So, in other words, your goal is teaching them self-hypnosis.
Not really, because a lot of people don't want to be bothered. They want the quick fix. Or they don't want to sit. They don't want to sit and meditate or do self-hypnosis. That's just not their thing. But if I teach them EFT, emotional freedom technique, then they have a tool that works in a couple of minutes.
Oh.
Where the self-hypnosis, you might be doing that for 30 minutes a day.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of people don't mind, but a lot of people do.
Or they don't have time, or, yeah.
Well, they perceive they don't have time.
Oh, okay. There are other issues or
Other things they'd rather do.
blockages. Oh, okay. So how would you help a surgical patient, for example, use it to reduce anxiety and actually assist in the healing process? We talked a little about this, but
I put them into a state of relaxation, and we do the suggestions that the body has the ability to heal itself and to help with that process during surgery and after surgery. So in recovery, I also put in suggestions that they will have less side effects from all of the medications and anesthesia and be in a better state when they first arrive in recovery. So it's a case of having to do that several times, and then the subconscious says, okay, I can help with that.
okay. Well, let's leave it right there for a moment while we do a station ID. This is KPPQ-Lp Ventura, 104.1 FM, and we're in the Women's Room, where we appreciate and support each other. I'm your host, Kathleen Good. My guest today is Virginia Matsuda, who is a hypnotherapist and a healing arts practitioner. She's in the Women's Room today to talk about hypnotherapy can be used for healing. Okay, and we're back. Virginia was just talking about how you can use suggestions to heal yourself from, for example, surgery. So most people are probably not aware of how they negatively affect their health or maybe their confidence level. Why do we have to be careful about how we think? It seems impossible.
It's difficult to begin with. Even for me, it took me a little while to start monitoring my thoughts to the point where I would catch the negatives and turn them around. But I have found that it really is extremely helpful when you can do that. Now, there's another thing that they have just done some research more recently on, and that's neuroplasticity. The doctors have found that the brain has tracks of where you have negative responses within your mind, and it lays down a deep track. The less negative you have and the more positive you put in its place, that comes up as in
the
not
track
as
kind
deep.
of fills in.
Right.
Yeah.
And then your positive part also is another track, and that gets deeper, so that just means the brain goes more to the positive thought than the negative thought, where before it was more negative than
right.
positive.
You're kind of stuck in the groove like in an old LP record.
Correct. And then the doctors didn't realize this could be changed. They thought once it was set, but it actually can change. And
But you have to monitor yourself. You have to be aware that I'm saying I get 2 colds every winter kind of thing.
Right.
And say, I never get sick.
Or colds just don't come to me. Something that changes the thoughts even slightly from negative to positive.
Right. Well,
it really does make a big difference.
That's really helpful. So how long does the hypnosis treatment last? Now, I thought of an example. A woman changes her eating habits with hypnosis, loses weight, but then 6 months later there's stresses in her life which cause her to eat poorly again, and she gains the weight back. Will she need a sort of booster treatment? How can she get back on track?
She might. The problem is that we haven't addressed the complete original problem that created that eating habit, but also as our lives become more stressful, we fall back into old habits, and unless we're able to totally eradicate that from the mind, then it's going to fall back into that pattern. It just depends on how deeply you were able to get into the subconscious and work on an original part of the problem.
And does that usually take quite a long time to get deeply in, or again, it
Not
varies?
really. It varies for each person. I see people for 3 to 10 sessions, and they're usually good. And a lot of them it's 6, but the problems they came in for have cleared, and they usually don't come back. They could have new problems because you're working on one thing at a time.
Oh, I see. More as it comes up, or does losing one make you more have more of a chance to find a deeper one?
It's
deeper
possible.
problem?
It's in EFT. They say it's peeling the onion, all those layers, and as you peel a layer, a new piece comes up because now it's safe to look at it.
Oh,
So the same would apply to hypnosis. As we remove one piece, then it's safe to look at the next part.
okay. So you brought up the technique called the emotional freedom technique, which you use in conjunction with the hypnotherapy.
I do.
Right. So could you acquaint your listener a little bit more with what happens in this emotional freedom technique?
Emotional freedom technique is tapping on acupuncture points, and there are not too many points that you tap on, but the idea is that in acupuncture you have energy lines within the body, and with the EFT, the trauma or what was perceived as the trauma by that person, whether it was in their childhood or adulthood, creates a block in that energy line.
Oh.
And when you tap on the points and say specific things, it clears the block.
I see.
And when you clear enough blocks, then you can collapse the problem.
So how do you do the tapping? What do you use?
Just your fingers.
Oh, just your fingers. And you tap on a certain spot
Well, there's
on your body.
there's maybe 8 different places you're tapping. It's not difficult. It's really easy to learn. And actually, because it's such a relaxing technique, the tapping on these points almost puts you into hypnosis because it relaxes you that much.
And if you do it frequently or over a long period of time, with the same thing, how you begin to tap and then you begin to feel yourself relax. And
Correct.
yeah.
And some people have found that if they tap every day, say for 30 days, they actually are clearing things they didn't even intend to clear, but they were there needing clearing, and they would clear out.
Even if they don't know what they were.
Well, they find out at the end because they no longer react some way that they did before, and they go, oh, I would have done this, and I didn't.
Oh.
So
I see.
they actually see a result.
So is EFT sort of a muscle memory kind of thing, like you hold a trauma in a certain area of the body?
Not so much as the blocks in the energy.
And you said that you use acupuncture points.
Acupuncture points. A psychologist originally, I believe it was a psychologist or an MD. Truthfully, I can't remember. He came up with this accidentally by taking an acupuncture course, and he had a client that had not been able to clear completely of the fear of water, and he'd been seeing her for a long time. And he thought, I wonder if I would tap on this point, what would happen? And he did. And she immediately went, oh my gosh. And she ran downstairs because it was at his house, and out in his backyard, he had a pool.
Oh, I was just imagining that.
She got in the pool, and it terrified him because he thought she's going to drown because she's going to panic. She did not. And so after that, and he developed a much more complicated technique. But Gary Craig, who's a Stanford engineer, developed this technique that is used more now, that's more simplified.
Now, I read a couple of articles, but again, with reading articles, you never know. But it said that EFT is not empirically supported by clinical psychology. In other words, no proof that tapping certain points clears out old conflicts.
I'm sure there are those in that camp, but Dr. Mercola advocates for EFT. Eric Robbins is an MD. He advocates for it. There are MDs back east and around the world.
And there are studies
who are using it, but there are studies from Harvard. There's a USC in Berkeley. There are several hospitals that are doing research and have found that there is empirical evidence for it.
Wow, that's good to know. So do you get anecdotal reports from clients who, say that I cleared this?
Oh, I do, and I see it in my office all the time.
You see them actually clear because they begin acting differently, or?
Correct.
Oh, can you think of an example?
Well, one of them would be, I didn't see, but I did a phone session with a woman who had agoraphobia.
With fear of strangers, right?
It was fear of leaving the house.
Oh, leaving the house.
And she hadn't been able to leave for a year. And so we did EFT over the phone because I had sent her all the information on how to do it. And the first session, at the end of an hour and a half, she was able to walk out on her porch. She had not been able to do that at all.
Oh, my goodness.
And at the end, she was able to go out, drive her car, hadn't been able to go to the doctor, drive her car, anything. And she did finally, because she was out of town, she finally drove to Ventura to my office.
Oh, wow. Well, that's really good evidence. Why do you think it works? How would you explain the process to a patient who inquires about the technique?
I think it's exactly what I've said before, the traumas, because I can ask a client what traumas they've had, and if they go back even to, say, school, and we clear that response. Say a teacher was really difficult to deal with, for the child to deal with, and the child, you and I as an adult wouldn't be bothered by it. The child was really bothered by it. So if you clear that, then they start seeing things differently. So think of it as what you had happen as the child now colors how you respond in the workplace to your boss. And that once you change that response as the child, going back in memory, you no longer see the boss as that person that is difficult to deal with. You can see it from a different standpoint. That's just one example.
Right. And you've also been talking a lot about this, but I want you to try to put it in one explanation. How might an unresolved conflict in a person's life interfere with healing? So they've got a difficult person in their life, issues with family or something like that. How in your healing from surgery, how could that negatively affect the healing?
Sometimes it's the negative self-talk that's been put into their subconscious by those around them. So as a child, you overhear a lot of things and you think it's about you. Because when you're a child, everything's about you.
Oh, right.
However, it wasn't you. It might have been they overheard something that mom and dad were talking about. But they thought, say, dad was mad at them, but dad was mad at somebody else. And so that negative self-talk can be carried forward as, I'm not good enough, or I am not lovable. A lot of people that really believe in the EFT, they begin to use it with their very small children to clear anything for the day so they don't bring it forward in their lives.
But how could the negativity, the negative talk, suppress natural healing forces? Because the body becomes depressed? Or?
The body just isn't present. It's not as open. Because if you're depressed or you don't feel good about yourselves, you're going to get sick more often.
Right.
So again, it's all about that talk and how you feel about yourself that helps produce the good or the bad health.
Right. Wow. Well, you've certainly given us a lot of food for thought, Virginia. Thank you so much for coming in, Virginia Matsuda, to explain hypnotherapy. This is KPPQ-Lp Ventura, 104.1 FM.